Hi, my name's Toby Price. I've been fishing now for about 5 years, predominantly in the Essex area. I actually started fishing without a rod when I was about 5 years ago. I didn't like the idea of putting a hook in a fish's mouth, and nor did my parents. So I actually I looked on YouTube. I used to watch loads of videos when I started, and I looked on YouTube on how to catch them without a rod and line. And it's to cut off at the top of a bottle like this, and then take the lid off and reverse it and poke it back inside. And then you fill the bottle up with bread and stones and poke a lot of holes in it. And I used to just wade out into the shallow parts of the river and like bury it under rocks. And that way I used to get minnows and gudgeon and like stone loach, and they used to swim in and they couldn't swim out. I don't know why, they're stupid. But yeah, that's why I used to go back to the bottle traps like an hour later, and I'd have like 40 minnows in there. And I was talking to my dad about it, and he said, I was telling him about it, and he said when he was younger, when he first got his fishing rod, and he got it from the classified newspaper, and I thought, well, I want to get a rod, I don't want to carry on doing the bottle traps. But I looked on the classified online, and I ended up finding a Minor Match DAM, a 13-foot like fiberglass float rod. And my brother drove me to Rettendon in Essex to go and pick it up. And yeah, and that's what I used. I used that. I had it was a crappy reel that my brother brought back from holiday once. And I went to the local tackle shop and asked him to kit me out with all the float fishing stuff that I needed, all the stuff to just catch silvers. And he kitted me out. And then I just used to fish on the River Chelmer, and I just used to trot the float down. I spend all day doing that with maggots. I hated the maggots though. My dad hated them. I used to keep them in an ice cream tub. And yeah, I was happy catching roach all day. And then one day I was going out to the river on my bike and had the rod attached to my bike frame. And I knew my neighbour fished, but I didn't really ask him about it. And he saw me going out with my rod and my bag and my net, and he said, and he kitted me out with a lot of stuff as well. He gave me loads of stuff for carp fishing, just a load of tackle. And since then I've just, really been hooked. And he took me a couple times, and I ended up getting all the kit that he gave me and getting it together properly. Started tying rigs. I learnt that on YouTube. And I actually had a go at carp fishing on the rivers in the winter. And then I ended up joining a club called Chelmsford Angling, which is loads of club lakes in and around Essex. I think there's 16 or 15 lakes. They're really good. So I had that ticket and I started fishing on Boreham Back Lake, because my dad told me that's where he started when he was younger. Just caught loads of small ones, really enjoyed it, but it was like my first proper experience at carp fishing. And then I went from there and I went to Tufnell Mere on the same ticket, and just used to go for days on there. It's just for loads of small commons with funny mouths, but yeah, it's good sport. And yeah, just really, really enjoyed it and got the bug.
Got another one.
And I ended up fishing up a load of the lakes on that ticket. And when I first started night fishing, it was on Boreham Mere on the main lake. And I was fishing there all the time, and some people that I know, Mick and Adam, fished there as well. And they sort of took me under their wing and helped me out and gave me some bits. And I learnt to fish as well with them, and they taught me a lot of stuff. And I had my first 30 from there. I had quite a few 30s from there, I think about 5. And then I met someone through them called Jim Chisnell, and he took me over to the quarry and I sort of worked over there for the winter with him, and in return I got to fish there, which was really nice of him. He taught me a lot of stuff as well. I only caught one, but I enjoyed it on there. It was good fun. It was just me and him fishing there really, and all the other people were really nice. And then from there, me and my mate Kai, we used to go to the carp shows. I think we've been to about 2 or 3, but I used to go to them with no money. And I just used to try and blag stuff. I used to go up to all the stalls and say, "Are you giving away any free stuff?" And I'd always get some freebies. And I went up to the Corder stall with him, and I tried to blag some stuff. I couldn't get anything, but I ended up talking to Dave Finn for hours. And I said to him, "Oh, can I work on the stall tomorrow? Tomorrow can I work here?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't see why not." And he spoke to Dovey, asked him, and Dovey was up for it. And he said, "Yeah, come down tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and yeah, and you can work here for the day." And I did that. I did that, and while I was there, I signed up for the Carp Academy. And at the Carp Academy, I was with him. And then at the end of it, he said if I could sort you out an apprenticeship at Corder, would you want it? And I said, yeah, definitely. I was really up for that. And he did end up sorting it. And the week after the Carp Academy, actually, I went on a monster carp with him. He invited me on the monster carp, and I was a runner on the shoot. I went to Carp Landness. That was I think that probably one of my favourite shoots I've been on. Really, really enjoyed that. Also because it was my first shoot, so that's partly why as well. But yeah, we went. So after that, he sorted out an apprenticeship, and I started there in product development. So alongside with the apprenticeship that I was doing, I had to do a college course 1 day a week, and I'll forever be grateful to Corder and Dovey for sorting that out for me. For me, fishing really went up a gear when I started fishing at Borehammere. Everything was more. There were pads everywhere. There was silt, a lot of silt. There was hardly any firm areas. The carp were a lot older and wiser, so I had to think about my approach a lot more. And my approach it was a lot different to how I was fishing. And something I definitely took away from there was how to be more finesse. I did well on there, and I moved on to the quarry in the winter, and I did take my skills that I learned on Boreham to there as well, but sort of went from hero to zero. I only managed one throughout the whole of the winter, but I still learned a lot on there as well, like how to fish from a boat, how to fish in deeper water, and just fish for different carp in a different environment. I then continued to fish on jumps and angling waters. One lake in particular was Cantsmere. But from there, I was really looking to evolve in my carp fishing into a bigger challenge for nicer carp as well. And I ended up joining my first syndicate called Golden Gates. So it was quite daunting because it was my first syndicate, and when I walked around, I saw there were a lot of carp, but there was also a lot of weeds, a lot of eelgrass. And where I hadn't fished, I'd fished a lake with pads, but I hadn't fished a lake with weeds all over the bottom and everywhere. So I soon realised that it wasn't something to sort of shy away from and be scared of. It was something that actually held the carp and a good feature to fish to. I also learnt how to play the carp safely out of weeds and get them in safely. That was also a good learning curve for me, because the lake I've gone on to after that is also really weedy. Yeah, Golden Gates, it was really good because it didn't have a really, really high stock, but it wasn't low. It was they're about, I think, I want to say about 300 carp in 12 acres. So you could have multiple hits. And I learned that so I had quite a few hits out of there, and I learned While catching the carp, so you land there, maybe top up the spot with a few spums, obviously making sure that the fish is safe. But I learned how to be efficient in angling to make the most out of a small window. And ultimately that efficiency and that angling has led me to catch my to-date PB at 39 pounds from there, 39 pound common. Really, really wicked carp. So I fished for a year on Golden Gates, and that was last year. And I fancied another challenge, maybe a trickier water, and I moved on to Cartagena Brook Lake. And it was a complete new challenge for me as well, because it was actually fishing in the weed. Over at Brook Lake there aren't many clear spots, and the carp tend to spend more of their time in the weeds than they do mooching around on the cleaner areas. So fishing in the weed was definitely the one. And when I started on there, I had no confidence in chods. I've never used them before. And I just thought, you know what it's like when you haven't tried something, you don't know what it's like. But anyway, I tried it, and lo and behold, I had a bite on it. And since then, it's been one of my go-to tactics. And the majority of my carp I've had out of brook have been on chods. As I said earlier, the chod rig has been a firm favourite of mine over the past few months. It's just, I really like it because it's so versatile, and over on Brook Lake it's really, really patchy, it's really weedy, loads of silkweed everywhere. So I'm never really sure, or you're never sure on the bottom you're fishing on. And if you fish in the chod, then you know you're almost always presented. It really is easy to set up. The first step is to slide on one of these naked tapered sleeves. This just stops the chod from flying all the way up the line. And you can set it to whatever you want. You can set it right down here if you're fishing on a cleaner area, or where I'm fishing is really weedy, loads of Canadian weeds, so I slide it right high up. That just means you're presenting in the weeds better than if you have it down here. It just drags it all into the weed like that. But up there it slides up. So I do that. I then move on to tying the actual chod section. I use 25 pound mouth trap, and I cut off about 7 inches off the spool. Then I just knotless knot onto a size 6 choddy. I use a size 6 because it just goes better with the smaller hook baits that I like to use. I always like to use smaller ones, and the size 6 is just more inconspicuous than a 4. Then move on to the D section. To create the D, you get the tag end from the knotless knot, and you get the micro ring swivel, and you poke the micro ring swivel through the tag end. Then you get the tag end and you put it through the eye of the hook, back through the eye of the hook, and with the tag you blob it, and you keep on blobbing it until it's perfect. And you see you end up making a D, but it's more often than not it's not perfect. What I do is I get a baiting needle and I just tease it until it's a perfect round shape that I'm happy with. Moving on from that, with the chod section, I get a size 11 ring swivel and tie it onto the eye. The knot I use for that is a 2-turn blood knot. You might struggle with getting the right length of chod that you want, so you have to practice it and do it a few times. But I tend to go as close to the eye as possible when I do the knot, and then when you're stretching it out and you pull in the knot tight, it won't be really, really short, but you can make it whatever length you want. To attach my hook bait, I get about 4 inches of bait floss. And I slide that through the eye of the micro ring swivel. I then thread on my hook bait and blob it down to secure the hook bait into position. So that's your actual chod tied. So I slide that onto the line. Then I put a line saver bead on. This just stops the swivel, so when you're playing a fish, because it's under tension, the swivel's not going to cut into the line, and then you get it cut off. So the line saver bead just stops that, and it protects your line when under pressure. I like to use a heli safe on the end to hold the lead on, only because in weedy conditions, where more often than not, you are fishing the chod rig, you're almost guaranteed to drop your lead, and you can always put the C-clip in if you want to fish on gravel or you don't want to drop your lead. But by dropping the lead in the weedy conditions, straight away the fish will come up through the layers of the water, come up onto the surface, meaning it's away from all the structures underwater. It's a lot safer for the fish and to get him in. Lead-wise, I always like to use the lightest lead possible, the lightest lead I can get away with, only because it is almost always plugging into loads of weed or silt. So with a lighter lead, it's not going to sink down into it over time and possibly end up pulling your rig into the weed. So there you go, that's the naked chod rig. Really easy to tie and super effective when fishing in weed. So Brook Lake, which is my current lake I'm fishing, I've done 14 nights now since the beginning of May, and I've landed 20 carp up to 37.5, which was a common. That was on my first session, on my first trip. So the biggin in Brook, bullnose at 50 pounds, around about the 50 pound mark, still eludes me, but I'm pretty sure if I keep on doing what I've been doing, learning from every session, that fish will come along.